So imagine you have been invited to a lavish banquet hosted by very wealthy and influential people. And the aroma as you walk in, right, the aroma of the food fills the air. And you find yourself surrounded by esteemed guests engaged in lively conversation. And suddenly, amongst the festivities, a woman enters, an ordinary-looking woman. She enters, and her presence, though unassuming, is captivating. She comes with a small alabaster jar, its contents concealed, but emitting a faint scent. This alluring fragrance that catches your attention as she walks by. With a sense of purpose, she approaches the guest of honor. And without hesitation, she breaks open this jar. And she pours out its contents on his head, anointing him with a gesture both extravagant and deeply meaningful. And as the fragrance fills the room, a hush falls over the crowd, waiting to see what is going to happen next. Some murmur in the corner with disapproval as at the perceived extravagance of her acts, and others just watch in awe, recognizing the significance of what has just happened. The scene, reminiscent of the events at Bethany, as recorded by Mark in chapter 14, invites us to consider the power and beauty of sacrificial love. Just as the woman poured out this costly perfume as an act of reverence and honor, so too we are called to pour out our lives in devotion to Christ, offering him our most precious gifts with abandon and with humility. We've backtracked and fast-forwarded a little bit here. So we've backtracked back to Palm Sunday into chapter 11, where Jesus enters the city of Jerusalem that's preparing for Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And unusually in this version, Mark gets there, and Jesus gets there and he determines it's a little too late, so he just turns around and goes back to Bethany. Kind of scoping out. You ever done that where you have something to do, an appointment tomorrow, and you go and you scope out the place, right? You make sure you know how to get there. You want to see the lay of the land. I've gone to teach in different places, and I'm like, okay, I just want to go see how everything looks, so in my mind, I know where everything is. So maybe that's what Jesus was doing. But anyways, he turns back, and then he comes back in the next day. And over the next days of this last week, he talks with people in the Temple Mount area, and he debates with people. And then we catch up with him here in chapter 14, which is one of the turning points as we not only talk about Palm Sunday, but Passion Sunday. And Jesus turns his head and begins to walk the last week of his life during this Passover feast. Friends, today's gospel reading tells us the poignant story of love and sacrifice and devotion. It's a narrative that invites us to contemplate the depths of Christ's love for us. And it also challenges us to respond with an extravagant love to him in return. It's a story that reveals the very essence of what it means to offer the pleasing aroma to the Lord. As we enter into this passage, we see and experience Jesus at Bethany reclining at the table of his friend Simon the leper, already in the place where he shouldn't be, associating with people he shouldn't associate with. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation as the Passover celebration is coming near, and it's the most significant festival in the Jewish calendar. Meanwhile, the religious leaders are off plotting against Jesus, wanting to put an end to him and to his ministry, but waiting for just the right time. And then, amongst that tension in the room, a woman approaches Jesus with this alabaster jar containing this expensive perfume. This perfume, we're told, cost the equivalent of a year's wages. Think about that for a minute and do that math in your head. Anybody buying perfume that it costs a year's wages? Yeah. Maybe an hourly wage for me, maybe. What would that perfume have cost you when you were working if you're not? And maybe a year of your cost of living, perhaps. That's a significant amount of money, right? And breaking the jar, not just simply opening the jar and dabbing a little bit in, right? She goes all in. Breaking the jar, she pours the fragrant oil over Jesus' head, anointing him with an act of profound reverence and love. And her gesture seems extravagant and wasteful, but it emanates this pleasing aroma that fills the room. She went all in, breaking the jar. No turning back. This is one of the central themes in this passage, is this woman's act of extravagant love, anointing Jesus with this costly perfume. It stands out not only because of its immense expression of devotion, but also its recognition of Jesus' impending death. This action of anointing is a symbol of great honor, recognizing his importance and his kingship. And similarly, this woman's act of pouring out this expensive perfume symbolizes her total surrender and devotion to Jesus. It's a fragrance that rises to the heavens. A fragrance that rises to heavens, pleasing God with a testimony to the depth of her love. Can you imagine that aroma? I tried to do a little bit today. Can you guys smell that out there? Probably not. You can smell it sort of. You can smell, like, if you really put your face like right here. It smells really great. So just needed about 5 of those maybe. But this aroma filled the room. Kind of like when you walk by Dillard's, right? The perfume counter at Dillard's. The perfume fills the room, whether you want it or not. They say scent memories are some of the strongest memories that we can build. Can you still remember? I can smell my grandmother's house. Right? Can you smell your grandmother's house when you walk in? Whether it's great food or mothballs, one of the probably, or a combination of the two, maybe. Right? I remember the smell of my grandma's kitchen when she'd sit me down to let me have my snack cakes and a Faygo pop that I didn't get at home. Those scent memories, they stick with you. And the aroma here creates a memory for everyone present. The aroma also serves as a powerful symbol of the sacrificial love and devotion. In the Bible, we see numerous references to a pleasing aroma from the sacrifices that we offer God. Noah is recognized after the flood. It says Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some clean large animals and some clean birds, and he placed an entirely burnt offering on the altar, and the Lord smelled the pleasing scent. And the Lord thought to himself, I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. Ezekiel tells another story about 70 elders of the house of Israel who were standing up in front, and the scent of the incense cloud rose to God. It's not only in there. Paul talks about it too. He talks about in the 2 Corinthians letter that he releases the fragrance of knowledge on them. God releases the fragrance of knowledge onto us. And then we in turn smell like the aroma of Christ's offering. Take that in for a minute. That you, whether you bathe this morning or not, smell like the aroma of Christ's offering. We smell like a fountain of life to those who are being saved, God says. This act was extravagant to the onlookers. Some posited their criticism because they were questioning the costliness of the perfume. They berate her, challenging her actions as wasteful, saying the perfume could have been sold and the earnings to help the poor. And she's right? Absolutely. But there's a unique reaction from Jesus. Jesus could have had that same reaction. He's been anointed with this oil. Remember, she goes all in. She doesn't just dab it and see how it smells. She goes all in. And Jesus could have responded in a similar way. I mean, right, they're right. If we were making a decision around the table and we had a year's worth of ministry wages to do this immense act or to feed hungry people for a time, we might make a different choice. I might make a different choice. But however, Jesus responds with compassion and understanding because he's affirming her actions. Rather than rebuking her with this act, he defends the woman's actions, recognizing them as beautiful and a beautiful expression of love and devotion. I mean, what good would have rebuking her at that point for Jesus done other than to humiliate her? And he reacts with great compassion. This act you have done has prepared my body for what is to come. He acknowledges the significance of her gesture, recognizing his burial is soon. He contrasts the criticism of those present with the honor bestowed upon the woman. Instead of berating her, he honors her, indicating that her act will be remembered forever and celebrated when the gospel message is preached. And in doing so, Jesus not only accepts her act of love, but also elevates it. He elevates it, declaring her story that it will be told forever. Will always be a memorial, a special memorial to her. It's kind of interesting, a special memorial to her, and we don't even know her name. But she's going to carry this proclamation with her forever. Her actions moved Jesus. He was inspired by her unbridled generosity. And his response lifted her out of the arithmetic of money into love. And then Jesus declared, he says this, whatever the gospel is preached throughout the world, this woman's story will be told. The statement underscores the lasting impact of this act of love. It serves as a reminder for all believers of the importance of recognizing and honoring acts of love, no matter how small or how enormous they appear. Additionally, it emphasizes the inclusivity of the gospel message, which transcends cultural or society boundaries, ensuring the woman's story is remembered and celebrated for generations to come. So friends, as followers of Christ, we are called to emulate the example of this woman, to offer our lives as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. This means giving sacrificially of ourselves, pouring out of our time and our talents and our resources in service to God and others. Romans 12:1 says, brothers and sisters, because of God's mercies, I encourage you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice that is holy and pleasing to God. This is your appropriate priestly response. True sacrificial love often requires us to step out of our comfort zones, to break open the alabaster jar and pour everything we have at the feet of Jesus. It may require us to make costly sacrifices, to love extravagantly, and to embrace the marginalized and the outcast. Paul tells us in Ephesians 5, live your lives with love. Following the example of Christ who loved us and gave himself for us, he was a sacrifice offering that smelled sweet to God. My friends, this story challenges us to reflect on our own responses to the love of Christ. The same extravagant love that the woman had, Christ has for us. How do you respond to the boundless love that Jesus poured out for us on the cross? Are you willing to break open your alabaster jars of your hearts and pour them out to Christ? Just as the woman in this passage gave sacrificially, holding nothing back, so too we are called to love extravagantly. And this means loving not only those who are easy to love, but also those who are more challenging to love, like me, like you. We are all challenging to love at times. Those who are different from us, and maybe even those who may oppose us. Extravagant love knows no bounds. It transcends societal norms and expectations. It's a love that reaches out to the marginalized, to the broken, to the lost, just as Jesus did all throughout his life. It's a love that sacrifices self-interests for the sake of others, just as Jesus did as an example for us. As we reflect on the story of the woman with the alabaster jar, may we be inspired. May we be inspired to offer our lives as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. May we be willing to break open the jars of our hearts and pour out our love without reservation. And may the fragrance of our love rise to the heavens, pleasing God and being a testimony of the transformative power of Christ's love in our lives.